flagship at the Battle of Trafalgar, and now flagship of the Commander-in-Chief Naval Home Command, the oldest warship in commission anywhere in the world. Early this century, already well over 100 years old, HMS Victory was in danger of sinking at her moorings in Portsmouth Harbour, and this etching by W.L. Wiley shows her dressed for Trafalgar Day in 1918. In the 1920s, the Society for Nautical Research raised the Save the Victory Fund, which paid for getting her into her own dry dock in the dockyard and building a museum close by. The fund, administered by the Society, continues to provide equipment, cordage and stores for the ship's maintenance, which cannot be supplied from naval sources. The late Lieutenant Commander Peter Whitlock, a former commanding officer of HMS Victory and previously the Royal Navy's last commissioned boatswain, who became Treasurer of the Society on his retirement from the Navy, had remarked that the ship, in addition to her ship's boats, launch, barge, pinnace and jolly-boat carried on board, lacked a 25-foot cutter slung from her quarter-davits. This would have been a fast pulling boat, used for carrying a few passengers or messages, for instance between the flagship and other ships at anchor at Spithead. On Peter Whitlock's death, the Society decided, as a memorial to him, to have such a cutter built and present it to the ship. Since HMS Victory has been restored to her appearance at Trafalgar in 1805, it was essential that the new cutter should be to a design as used at that time, and preferably built using authentic timber and materials, and it was suggested that it would be very interesting if it could be launched on special occasions and rowed as a demonstration. Research at the National Maritime Museum produced a shear draft, a type of drawing combining shape, layout and construction, which was used for building ships of any size at the time, but which a present-day boat builder, trained to use orthographic drawings, wouldn't understand. The shear draft was therefore translated into a modern-type lines plan and a construction plan for the boat builders to use. And for the benefit of non-technical members, a half model was constructed and correctly clinker-built using hardwood veneer for planking. The model shows the fine lines of the cutter. It was decided to build two cutters, one by Chatham Historic Dockyard using authentic materials, elm for planking and grown oak for stems and frames, clinker-built and copper-fastened, which will not go afloat but be a historic record for the future, and a working version, identical in appearance once painted, but using modern materials. This is the record of the building of this boat at Chippendale Craft in Norfolk. Jack Chippendale is lofting the design from the lines plan to full size and fairing the lines as he goes. This requires a lot of patience. Now a section, lifted from the lofting, is prepared for making the building mould, drawing round the spline for the section. And now offering up the building mould on the drawing. The stem is laminated out of mahogany veneers, glued together and clamped in a jig which holds it to the correct shape. More veneers are added and the clamps tightened. This produces a very rigid stem, at least as strong as the grown oak one which would have been used historically. Jack is working on his own, as it's Saturday afternoon, but during the week he has two apprentices, Paul, 21 and nearly fully trained, and James, 16, who left school and began at Chippendale Craft when they were starting to build the cutter. While Jack did the lofting with the boys helping, they do most of the building work under his instruction. The stem is finished now, set up on the keel and being shaped by James to the angle of the planking at various points round it. Looking along the keel now, past the scarf where the stem joins on, and the hog, to the sternpost. The sternpost is mortised into the keel, and Paul is drilling through the joint, ready to fit in hardwood dowels, glued into place to make the whole thing rigid. Now they're setting up the midship building mould, getting it dead level and square across. These are every 25 inches along the boat, with laminated frames which become part of the boat, fastened temporarily to the building moulds. Marking the bevel on the end of the laminated frame. And now a second frame. All the building moulds are in now, with the laminated frames alongside them. 2 planks have been fitted, and a third one coming on. The planks are in lengths, scarfed together, and a mahogany plywood, glued in place, as well as nailed for appearance. Mixing up some more glue, and then spreading glue along the edge of the previous plank, ready for the new one to come into place. The new plank is then fitted, screwed to the sternpost. Then the scarf is made, joining the plank to the next forward length, which is glued and clamped until the glue goes off. These clamps hold the plank and the seam down to the previous plank. Drilled for nails to the previous plank, nails driven in from the outside, cut off, copper roofs put on, and then riveted over onto the roofs. There's a space between the nails, halfway between the frames, where additional frames are going to be fitted after the planking is completed. Paul brying off the edge of the plank to the bevel for the next plank to fit to it. And now James marking the angle of a scarf between lengths of plank. Jack Chippendale is using a spiling board. It's a dummy plank, wider than the proper ones, which is clamped round and adjusted very carefully so that there is no twist or strain. Then it's marked from the line of the lower plank and the width put on for its upper line. The spiling board doesn't become part of the boat, but it's used time after time to get the shape of each plank as they go on. Now Jack is drilling by hand through the spiling board, along the line on it, and into the plank below. Paul is checking the plank width where it meets the stem. Now they're holding the spline by weights along the line of holes to get a fair line, and putting on the width marks by ruler, with the spiling board laid on one side for the widths to be transferred. Fixing the spline now round the width marks, ready for marking. And then penciling round the spline. Now James is cutting the plank along the pencil line using an electric jigsaw. And then he's planing the edge of the plank. It's then offered up to the boat, edges glued and nailed and clenched. Now the planking is complete, and the laminated frames are being made up to go between those built in on the moulds. Several laminations are laid up and glued all over. You'll notice the workers are wearing rubber gloves to protect their hands from the glue, which is absolutely everywhere in this operation. The bundle of laminations is bent into place and held while holes are drilled near the ends for nails. Then the frame is carefully checked for line and position before the rest of the fastenings are added. Now Paul is fitting the floor timbers, which are level across the boat and connect the frames on either side. Yes, it does go that way round. Drilling down through and holding the floor timbers down in place while a nail is driven from the outside, grooved and clenched. Now the riser is being put in, a scarf glued and ready to join on to another length. It lies inside the frames and supports the thwarts. Made up in lengths and scarfed together, it's fastened through both the planking and the frames. The risers go the whole length of the boat. And when we come to the stern, there's quite a lot of shaping. and even here they have to be fixed in exactly the same way. Now the boat is virtually finished, the exterior still to be painted. But inside, the thwarts are in with their knees, the inside is painted, and they're beginning to fix the floorboards. These are screwed down to the floor timbers and the ribs. Now the floor is almost completed. Now the great moment of getting the cutter out of the door of the building shed. It only just fits for length. And as you see, it's brought out on rollers. Now it's far enough out to get the trailer under the stem. To connect it up and winch it up onto the trailer. An afterthought here, the oar ports had to be leathered to save chafe on the oars, and it meant opening them up a little to allow for the extra thickness of the leather. Paul cuts a slice off the foreside of the port. And now he rounds the thole pin to make a good surface for the oar to push against. Now James is planing up the oars. These are pine and the looms are square sectioned, so cannot be feathered in use. The handles, though, are rounded. The sail loft, which works largely on traditional sails. Stephen is making an eye splice in the boat rope, which goes round the edge of the sail. It's synthetic rope, but resembles traditional hemp so closely that people are deceived by it. Now the eye splice is being opened up for the thimble to be forced in, hammering it down on a fid to stretch the eye. Now the sail is being roped, the rope lying along the edge of the sail with one stitch for every turn of the rope all the way down. The sailcloth is also synthetic and resembles the traditional flax, but is much softer to handle. Now the completed boat was launched at Whale Island and is rowing out past the dockyard into Portsmouth Harbour for trials. The masts are stepped and the sails bent onto their yards and lying between the rowers. Tossing the oars in salute, a ceremonial operation which requires some practice to get it right. Now give way together. now with the sails set, sailing from under the shadow of an aircraft carrier alongside the dockyard. The crew are busy learning their sail drill. They don't get very far at a time before the order comes to lower the sails and start again. The cutter's deceptively fast under sail, but makes so little fuss in the water that she doesn't appear to be moving very fast. But she can overtake modern yachts of her size. Now sails lowering again and back to oars. It's all part of the drill. Sails up again. Down again. At the moment, they have to be lowered for tacking, though when the crew are fully worked up, it should be possible to dip the yards round the masts without lowering them. And sometimes one sail is one side of its mast and one the other. In this case, the sails are goose wing for running before the wind. You see how she slips through the water with very little fuss. Now the sails are lowered again for the last time, and sailing practice is over for the day, and under oars the cutter returns to her base at Whale Island.